Welcome to the Storycraft Cafe. Come in, grab a cup of your favorite beverage, and get ready to join the storytelling conversation. Storycraft Cafe is brought to you by Dabble, the ultimate cloud-based fiction writing software. Here we're going to bring together storytellers from all walks to encourage and empower you to craft your best story. I know I say this all the time, but boy, do we have a fantastic show for you today. Mariana Zapata joins us to talk about her amazing journey from indie published author and having her books find a loyal following on social media to erupting and finding not only an audience through indie publishing, but then being courted by Big Five publishers and this amazing story. You're going to love it. We'll get to that in just a second. If you're enjoying this podcast and would love to hear maybe one of your favorite writers or a story coach or someone in the writing field that you think would make a great episode, drop me a line at hank.garner, G-A-R-N-E-R, at dabblewriter.com and tell me who you would like to hear on the podcast. I'll put a link to my email address in the show notes just to cut out any confusion. We'd love to hear from you. Be sure to review this podcast in your favorite podcast app. Drop us 5 stars if you're enjoying it. We'd appreciate it. It helps other people find the show. Now let's get over to our interview with Mariana Zapata. And we are live here in the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner, and today I am super excited to have Mariana Zapata joining me today. She has an amazing new book out. It's kind of new, and this is going to be one of the things we talk about today. The Wall of Winnipeg and Me is an amazing, fantastic book. I loved it so much. I know so many other people are as well. Mariana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, I appreciate you having me so much. I'm really excited. I hope I don't, stick my foot in my mouth, but I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much, Hank.
Well, I stick my foot in my mouth usually multiple times a week. So it's all just it's all just family and friends here. So
anyway. Fun with friends. I like it.
Yeah. Mariana, I like to start our conversations with a fun question. And so what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
Oh, man, that's a really, really good one. I kind of have this very faint memory. I watched RoboCop, okay. Which I know some people don't remember, and that makes me feel, I don't know how that makes me feel, but I remember watching it and just like, I don't know, it gave me this kind of feeling. And I was like, what if it would have ended in a different way? And it's funny because I remember writing fan fiction about it, like very briefly. So I feel like that's probably my first memory with wanting to write, was just wanting the story to be a little bit different and, trying my best at like 6 years old, I think I was, to write like a tiny little story about it. So that's probably my earliest memory, to be honest with you.
I love it. In your bio, you talk about writing love stories from an early age, and it sounds like probably around that same age. Where did your love of these types of stories come from?
That's a really good question. I feel like maybe I can just kind of blame my family, because they're so loving. That love has always just been such an important part of me and my life. So, I guess it's just something I've really enjoyed watching and being a part of. And I kind of just wanted to make up my own stories, relating to a different kind of love. But yeah, I think that was maybe it.
That's so refreshing to hear, because so many people have a very different story, that they come from harsh circumstances, and their interpersonal relationships are strained. And, not everyone that we're related to is always loving and caring, and and very different stories come out of a lot of those emotions, and those are all absolutely valid, and we need someone to tell those kinds of stories. But it is it's very refreshing to hear someone say, I loved my family so much. It makes me want to write about, relationships and healthy things. That's a very good thing to hear.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. So, from that early age of wanting to tell stories and to bring people into your imagination, fast forward a little bit, what made you actually take the leap to write your first book? And then, what was your path to publication? A lot of people, have a very circuitous route that they travel, to becoming an author. Is this something that you always had a very singular motivation for, or has your life taken, some other paths to get you here?
I would like to say that I've experienced that. I mean, writing has just been something I've done my entire life, from like writing, the RoboCop stories and, Prince and Princesses stories when I was very, very young. And then as a teenager, I wrote fan fiction about boy bands, and writing has always been a part of me, and I've carried that with me, but it was never seemed something that could be a job for me, like that just seemed kind of like, like a rock star situation. That's just this, wonderful fantasy that, some other, imaginary people are lucky enough to have that kind of opportunity, but it never seemed, it just never seemed like even an option. It didn't seem like an opportunity, that could be something that I could have access to. So, I wrote through my teen years, and in my early 20s, I was still writing fan fiction, and I was doing, I had a pretty good following with it. But at that time, I had a normal job. I was going to school. I hated my job with a passion. I worked in customer service, and it just, I think I'm just too sensitive. And it just kind of,
it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just kind of just sucked the soul out of my life. And my boyfriend at the time, I think, I would bring home just, so much like heartache and just frustrations from work. And he was like, well, what if you just, he goes, what if you just quit and just focus on writing? And it kind of just, it blew my mind, because I'm like, are you sure? Are you serious? We had just moved in together. We had a couple of roommates. We had just bought our first house. So it was just very wild. And I was so scared. I mean, so scared, because I had a steady job, and it's a huge leap to go from something that something that, that you get a regular paycheck from, to just kind of saying, all right, let me try and do this fantasy job. I don't, I have no idea if I'm going to do well in or what's going to happen. And so I kind of just did it. And I was fortunate enough that at the time, self-publishing was just starting to get, very popular. So the first book did okay. But, you just kind of stick it out, and you're like, I'm going to believe in myself, and nothing ever works out the first time. And fortunately for me, it's worked out, but I hope that answered it okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had a conversation with fantasy author Brandon Sanderson a couple of years ago. He was on the show, and we talked about that writing is one of these pursuits that it's kind of strange, because if you had this hobby where you like to tell stories, people automatically put some sort of requirement on that. And he said, if you like to go to the Y and play basketball, a night or two a week, nobody says, okay, but when are you joining the NBA?
Yeah.
And he said, you just go play basketball because you like to play basketball. But if you like to write, people are like, well, when are you going to publish? And that really made me think differently about this pursuit. But then it sounds to me like that you were very happy to have this hobby that you engaged in, that you did just for joy, until you started thinking about, well, maybe I could make a living out of this. Maybe I could pursue this. Before you decided to publish and to put your stories out there, how did you feel about your writing? And were you happy just to create these worlds and characters? And
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love writing. I love making up stories and just staring off into space and just letting my mind wander. So that's actually a really, really great way of putting it, what you said about Brandon, because it's just something that's just a part of me, something that I love doing, even, when it was, like you said, just a hobby. Yeah. But I was fortunate enough that I had a good following. But not necessarily that, but my little brother used to read my stories and he was like, "You're so funny." And he motivated me so much. Like he seemed to believe in me and he made me feel like I had, something special. And sometimes I randomly think about this college professor I had. It was my, I think it was like in my freshman year of English, we had to write like a story about our experience right before college. And I just wrote this really funny story about a flying cockroach that was in my room the night before my first day. And, and he showed it, on I can't remember what those are called. The transparency thingy.
The overhead projector.
Yeah. The overhead projector. And he was like, "This is my favorite one. It was so good." And I was kind of like, it was right before I was still writing fan fiction. And I was kind of like, okay, maybe I have something. But, I think about all that practice I did before, all the stories I wrote, and I would probably die of embarrassment if anyone read anything before I published it. I've had some people ask me like, "Oh, what was your username?" And I'm like, I'm never, ever going to tell anyone that. It's practice. It was so many, probably millions of words of practicing, but it was for me. And each story I felt like helped me grow and helped me, gain my voice and the kind of storytelling that I wanted to, to share with the world. So, I always kind of think that I don't write books. I'm more of a rewriter because I rewrite just everything. I can't tell you how many drafts I go through until I get to a final one, but it's bad.
I've not had a lot of experience with fan fiction, but I know that some people, you included, really cut your teeth on writing stories in other people's worlds with other people's characters. Do you find that that starting with something someone else created, does that free you up to just kind of immerse yourself in the world? And I guess what I'm asking is, what's the difference in writing fan fiction versus writing something completely new and different? And do you approach them differently? What's the mindset difference when in the two?
I want to say that, at least for me, it was kind of more of like, it didn't seem as much of a scary thing taking like characters that someone else already came up with and kind of having a template to grow from. I mean, there's all different kinds of fan fiction, alternate reality and alternate universe. If you're going from like vampire books, which I did, to just, they're human in the versions that I wrote. But I feel like it's just kind of having a template and saying, okay, this is what I have to work with, and I'm going to go from there, versus having to come up with characters, that you're just trying to make into real beings. I sit there and I think even like, what kind of foods do they like? So I feel like it's a lot more intimidating starting from scratch, or maybe I just make it up in my head. And it's just one of my fears is having to start, from nothing, from raw material and make up your own. So it's kind of like I feel like fan fiction is a very safe space. And just, coming up with your own things is kind of terrifying.
When you are coming up with a new book, a new set of characters, are there certain exercises that you do to get to know your characters? Like some people will create character sheets and, they talk about this character's favorite color and, the clothes they like to wear, the foods they like to eat, and they'll go way into detail. And sometimes, or maybe even a lot of times, those character details don't even make it into the book, but it's just what the author uses to understand the character. What's your process like when you're creating new characters?
Absolutely the same exact way. I go through so many details that I would say 90% of it doesn't end up, in, I'll think of, just even different like lines or sayings, or little, tics that people have. And none of that even makes it, or even how many siblings they have. And I'll name the siblings and, it's just like you said, even little things like favorite foods. If someone likes, one of my characters I know likes Pop-Tarts, another one likes, a Mexican dish called tres leches, which is like a cake. So it's just like little things that you use to build up the characters. And as I write, I always end up getting more ideas that really structure the kind of character that they are, the kind of person that they are. And so I'll just keep adding it. I have storyboards with just Post-its on them. And I just continuously just add to it, even if it's nicknames that aren't, used. So yeah, I go pretty into detail with it. And it's, I don't want to say it's not for no reason, but it doesn't make it to where other people become familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah. When you first started publishing, you talked about the indie publishing revolution that had really taken off. And was this about 10 years or so? When did you start publishing?
I published my first book in 2012.
Okay.
I want to say that I remember hearing about self-publishing maybe in like 2010, 2011. There was this really popular author at the time named, she's still an author, but I just remember she was the one that introduced me to self-publishing, just the way that she was releasing her stories, named Amanda Hawking, and she was doing great. Yeah. Her stories were doing amazing, and she was really the inspiration why I was kind of like, well, if she didn't, I can try. I have nothing to lose, so. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
around that time, and we can, trace it back a couple of years before that when the Amazon Kindle came out, and then Amazon created KDP, or Kindle Direct Publishing, as a support system to really to get content to publish on their Kindle, and which then transformed self-publishing, which used to be a very dirty word. It was really a pay-to-play system, and transformed that into a way for people to publish their stories and to find an audience, and got rid of the gatekeepers. And, there's this transformative moment where publishing was no longer in the hands of the few, but was really opened up to the masses. And lots and lots of, things have happened then. Careers have been made because of this. And I think you are, a success story when we're talking about this change in publishing. Were you surprised when you published your first couple of books and started to gain a following and realized that, now I can go directly to my readers? And do you think that helped you to foster a relationship with readers that maybe, up until then had been non-existent in the way that writers could connect with their readers?
Oh, absolutely. When I first started thinking about publishing my books, I, pitched them to a couple of publishing companies, and, a lot of the feedback that I got back were what I'm known for now is my books are too long, and they're too slow. So those two things. And they were like, if you cut it back to, an average book is usually between 70,000 and 90,000 words. And I think the ones I was pitching to them were 140,000. I was like, but if I take that out, that's just taking the magic away from my book. And, I'm like, and if I make them slower, then they're just, they're not going to be me, and they're not going to be the story that I want to tell. And so, it worked out for me that I'm very, very stubborn. And I was like, I'm not going to change this, from what I've made it, that I'm very happy with. And so it was kind of like, well, if you don't want it, then I'm going to find someone else that does, even if I have to do this myself, and it's going to be a lot harder, and scarier. And, just you become your own, marketing person, your own publicist, you do everything yourself. And at that point, like at the beginning for everyone, like, editing is very expensive, and just everything that comes out of that is out of pocket. So it's very scary, but, it's worked out for me, and I'm so happy that I waited, and that I eventually found a really great publisher and an editor, more than anything, that I feel like really understands me and the kind of stories that I want to tell. And now I feel like, I've shown readers that it's okay to have very long books or very slow books, and just kind of, tell your own story. If we all followed what everyone else wants us to do, it's kind of like,
Well, by your own description, your books are very long and very slow. And there's, we talk about tropes in writing, and slow burn is something that everyone uses to describe your books. Slow burn romantic.
It's true.
In a day and time where it seems like storytelling is more and more catering to the attention deficit ness of our society, where when you watch a movie, you're dropped into the action of a scene, and then you figure out who the characters are after you've already been kind of inundated with a thing going on. Or I think about reading books from 20, 30 years ago, and you being 100 pages in and nothing happens. You're just kind of getting to know people and all that, versus books that are published today where, things are happening at a very different pace. For someone like you who loves to take her time and really sell the characters and really let readers get immersed in the world and the characters, how do you feel about the changes in what we think of as mainstream publishing versus, you definitely are not, you're not sold on that concept. You believe that readers will hang in there with you. And so what how do you feel about the ideas that things need to happen super fast? And what do you do to earn that trust with readers that they know, I am going to stick it out because I know it's going to be worth it?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's really interesting because I have this conversation with people all the time where even when you watch videos on social media, it's kind of like you lose interest after the first 10 seconds for the most part. After that, you're like, well, nothing's happening. I'm just going to, swipe up and go to the next thing. I think that there's just so much, just so much stimulus now that we have access to, and just so much information that it's kind of like, our time is so precious to us. And so we have to choose how we want to spend it. And so I get it. When you have millions of videos online, you don't want to spend, more than 10 seconds on something because you just have access to so many other things. And especially with books, it's the same way. I don't know how many, I want to say I've read somewhere that there's 50 romance books that are, published every week. It might even be more than that. And so it's just and especially what you said earlier about having access to Kindle now. You have millions and millions of books that you can read. But I feel like there is a market for people who want, I don't want to say more character-driven books because you can definitely have a character-driven book and something that's shorter. But I feel like it's just, finding the right story that you want to tell and, kind of weaving it in a way I would hope that readers become invested in the characters. Because I feel like I've noticed a lot with some of the books I read, especially when I used to read a lot and very quickly. I'd finish the book and a day later, I wouldn't be able to tell you even the name of the characters I read or anything like that. You finish it and you move on. And the stories, you might remember some part of the story, but you don't remember, like I said, you can't even remember the name of the character, much less 3 weeks later. So my goal with my books, at least I want to believe, is that you really get to know them and you get to love them and root for them. So that, I would hope that my readers enjoy them. And so you do remember it weeks from then, or you come back to it eventually. And I've been really fortunate that a lot of my readers are like, they're the absolute best, but they'll be like, I've read this book 10 times. And I just, it's crazy to me. And I'm so grateful for it. But I really try and spend my time just picking and choosing, like I said, the kind of story and, the kind of character development that gets people to invest in them. So.
Yeah. Are you surprised ever by the audience that follows you and read your books? Do you hear from men, from the age range of readers? Are you ever surprised by who chooses to fall in love with your books?
It's incredible to me. My readers blow my mind on a regular basis. I've done signings before where women will come with their husbands and, the female reader will buy a book and her husband's like, get me that one. And so then they'll sit there and fight. And then, a lot of husbands will tell me how much they love my books too, or how they listen to the audiobooks together. And, it's crazy to me that I have, a very, I'm very pleased with the amount of men that I have that enjoy my books, that, like the humor or just, the character development maybe. And then I'll get emails from, people who are in their 80s, 70s and 80s, longtime teachers, and just the most like so much variety and the careers that they did, or just the kind of, the kinds of backgrounds that they come from. So it really, it's so surprising. It's just, I don't know how I got this lucky.
Well, speaking of audiobooks, audio is the largest growth market in publishing right now. Lots and we've theorized about what has caused this boom in audiobooks, and I think the biggest thing is we all are walking around with phones with plenty of storage and, high speed internet access. And it's just super easy to get a phone, and, we've got earbuds, it's just super easy to consume books like that. Now, when in your publishing, story, did you start realizing, the impact that you could have with audio?
Oh, it's really wild. Like you said, how much it's exploded over the years. I feel like, maybe like in 2016, when I released the original version of The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, that's when readers were really like, I don't want to read it. I want to listen to it. And I was like, you're really gonna like it. It was a crazy idea to me that you would wait to listen to it. But I didn't listen to audiobooks back then, so it wasn't something that I was familiar with. But now, as I've gotten into it, I mean, the quality of them, and like when you get a really great actor to do it, it's amazing. It just brings it to life. So now, to an extent, I really enjoy probably listening to them more than I read them. But so I completely understand it. It's really amazing. Or when you have the full cast narrations that some books do. I mean, that's just amazing. I love it. I wish I could do that for mine, but I'll settle for doing a duet.
It's pretty wild when you get into that and then you get lost in it and realize, oh, where have 6 hours gone? I've been living in this book all this time.
Exactly.
You started gaining a following on social media and TikTok, especially. Your books just blew up. And I could talk about that a little bit. How, you were a successful author. You had, developed a readership. You had developed fans, for lack of a better word, that followed along. And then, I don't know if it was all of a sudden or if it was a slow burn or whatever, you start kind of noticing that everybody and their brother are talking about you and your books, especially on TikTok. That seems to have really just ignited a fire over there. What happened? And what was that like for you?
I asked myself the same thing. What happened? I mean, it's crazy. I had a career, and it was doing amazing. And I was, I have zero complaints about how well, my books were doing and how wonderful my readers are. And then just all of a sudden, it was back when I was only self-publishing. So I saw my reads starting to go up and up daily and I was like, what's going on? And I don't really get on social media. I mean, I feel like I like Instagram, and I get on there. Because once
that's
again,
where all the good vibes are.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I see it. I never get on there and like leave upset unless, I get tagged in something that might hurt my feelings for 5 minutes. But for the most part, it's just a fun scrolling, like we said, the quick stimulus. But it was, I was kind of like, I've heard of TikTok. This was maybe a couple years ago, but I didn't get on. I didn't have an account or anything like that. So I just saw them going up. And then just all of a sudden I would have readers who are like, oh, did you see, someone posted this video of you on TikTok and it had, 1 million views, or I don't know what it was at the time, but it was a lot. And I was like, I have no idea what this even is. What is TikTok? And to be honest with you, I have an account now. I don't know the password for it. I think there's like one video on there. So I'm just about the worst person to talk about it, but I'm so grateful for the reach that platform has gotten to, an even bigger, audience that I never would have imagined. I mean, I feel like for the most part, up until 2020, 2021, most of my readers are probably about 15, 16, to the 80s. And then all of a sudden it was like, my cousin who was 12 would be like, my friend loves your books. And I'm like, 12-year-old reading my books. I don't know how.
Slow down. Maybe we need to talk about this.
Not that I wanted to talk because I was stealing my aunt's, Harlequin novels when I was the same age. So I try and take a step back. Right. But at the same time, I guess adult Mariana was like, I don't want to traumatize anyone. Right. So it's just been, it's incredible. I mean, it really is incredible, like what that platform has been able to do for so many careers, for so many people. And I know how much, it's been wonderful to me. My Italian publisher sent me one of my books, and I was kind of reading the back of it, and I went into Google Translate, and it said something like, 600 million views on TikTok. And I was like, how is this humanly possible? Like I
don't know 600 million people.
So
Wow.
it's insane. I mean, it really is it's crazy to me. And, thank you, everyone on TikTok. I appreciate you. But, everyone on Instagram and Facebook and, everywhere in the world, I appreciate you.
Love it. So you gained the attention of traditional publishers. And did this happen because of the social media virality, or did the social media stuff come because of the traditional publishing? Do you see a trajectory where one thing led to another, or kind of what happened with going from being an independent author to then catching the attention of New York and, them wanting to get in on all the goodness that was happening?
I wonder if it did affect it to an extent. But I feel for the most part that after 2014, I remember one of my second book at the time, Under Lock, had the New York Times list and the USA Today list. And my agent at the time had really been pushing me toward publishers. But some of the editors that I spoke to left, a funny taste in my mouth that I was kind of like, it was more of what I told you from before I even started publishing, where they were like, I remember one lady was like, your name isn't marketable enough. She goes, you should change it to something. I know. It really made me mad. Yeah. Once again, the stubbornness kicked in, where I was like, so people won't want to read my books because of my name. That just, that really frustrated me. And she was like, I want you to write more, I would want you to write books like Danielle Steele. And, did you really want to write a book about an ex-felon? I don't feel like that was a really good idea. I think you should tame it back. And I was kind of like, I think people like seeing human beings, who can change, like not everyone changes, but I feel like for the most part, we all have that ability in ourselves.
Everyone loves a redemption story.
Exactly.
I don't care who you are.
Exactly. And so it's just kind of like, it was those conversations that I had back in 2014, 2015, that I was kind of like, maybe this isn't something that I want to go toward. It was only my second book. I hadn't established myself really. But over the years, there was a couple more conversations that I had with a few other publishers that still didn't feel right to me. I mean, I don't want to say I'm a control freak, but I kind of am. So I really enjoy just, controlling.
It makes you wonder if some of these people in publishing have ever read a book.
You would figure. I'm like, what are you reading if this is what you're thinking? Like,
right. Anyway.
And so I want to say that my next agent that I had, Jane, who was amazing, she was kind of like, she'd always be like, just tell me when you're ready. I mean, I appreciated that she didn't push me into doing something that I wasn't ready for. And so finally, I think she was kind of like, I think she said, I think that this is the time, that maybe this is, for you to take the next step. And I was kind of like, okay, maybe. I was really sweating it. And she introduced me to my editor, May, who apparently had been trying to get me to come toward Avon for several years. But my agent already knew that I wasn't going to have any part of it. So she's like, now's, no. And, it was just, maybe all, the great things going on, really got them more motivated to bring me on board. But I loved her from the moment I spoke to her. And so I'm really glad that I found a home with them. And, I feel like she understands me.
Yeah. Well, in the early days of indie publishing and the Kindle revolution, for better or worse, there was a lot of tribal activity going on where we had the indie folks that were making a huge splash over here, and we're so much better than traditional publishing. And then you had the traditional published authors, and they all had their tweed jackets with the elbow patches, and we're so much better, and we're being funny, but there was a lot of tribalism there. And I was always a little skeptical of the tribalism because, while wonderful things are happening over here, that doesn't necessarily make the other side evil. Exactly. There may have been some evil things done, but that doesn't make them evil. And I say that half jokingly, but
of course.
But a lot that has happened over the last couple of years is we're seeing that what has truly happened in the self-publishing revolution is that the power has gone back to the authors, and where it should have been, and authors are finding out now that they can really have the best of both worlds in some cases, where you can, have some projects that you market completely independently, directly to your audience. Some of them have benefited from going through a traditional publisher and having the reach and the scope that brings you. As someone who has had success in both areas and now has a foot firmly in each world, how do you feel about the tribalism, the camps, and what do you, as someone who found success as an indie, what has the traditional world brought to you?
I completely agree with you on the tribalism. I mean, I feel like that toward just, everything in life in general is like, the very polarizing, white right. and black, things, aren't even gray, I would say. Everything is just a mix of different colors, and there's good and there's bad with everything. So I've right. always, I think I just kind of isolated myself, because I'm just kind of like a hermit that lives, under a rock. So I never got too involved with, trash talking one or trash talking the other. I'm just like, I just want to focus on myself, and I'll put my books out. The only person I'm competing against is myself. So I feel very passionate about, the opportunities that I got from being indie, that I was able to just say, to hell with what I was told at the time, and yeah. do the kind of stories that I was able to do, and that I was fortunately successful enough to prove to the people, to the naysayers who disagreed with, the kind of thing that I wanted to write. And now I feel like the kinds of stories that I tell have become more accessible for other authors, to where they feel, like it's okay for them, to kind of do their own thing too, with indie publishing. But traditional publishing, on the other hand, I mean, the most amazing part about it is honestly just being able to get your stories out to so many more people in a way, because it was kind of how you said, it wasn't even like authors who would be like, oh, indie is trash, or, traditional publishing. A lot of readers for very, and I feel like that's even still a thing now, to where, there's a misconception about the quality that you get from, being an indie author, to where you don't think that, some people might not think that the storytelling is, as up to par as it would be with traditional publishing, right. Which is unfortunate, because there's so much talent, in both camps. So, it kind of adds a little bit more credibility, I guess, being traditionally published. And, it was it's just been kind of amazing when I go to bookstores like Barnes and Noble and they have stacks of my copies, or, going to, I went to Books A Million and they had some, whereas before, I understand it's, more difficult to get indie authors into the big bookstores. So it's been, it's been amazing to see that. And the price points are a little bit more, affordable for readers. So that's also really great. Yeah.
Well, before we go, Mariana, I've got something that I love to hear people talk about, and it's my favorite thing to ask writers. And when you're beginning a project, when you have a brand new thing that you're working on, there's a moment of creation that happens. In one moment, nothing about the wall of Winnipeg and me, nothing about this exists. And then either a character walks onto the stage of your mind, or maybe you start thinking of some scenario and then you start populating that scenario with made up people. And then something happens and the story does exist. And then it's your job as the writer to dig the story out and excavate it and polish it up. And, and then it becomes a book and a fully formed story exists. Then what is that first moment of creation like for you?
First of all, that was such a beautiful way of putting it. I mean, that was amazing. I love that, Hank. That was really, really wonderful. It's kind of like, it's the most exciting moment, I guess, you can imagine. My husband's a musician, so he'd always say that, there was no better feeling than being up on stage, just at the beginning where everyone's just like, screaming at you. But, writing is such such a personal thing, at least for me, that where, I'll just randomly be sitting there, I'll watch something. And like you said, the character comes on stage and it's just like, an enlightenment in a way, like, whoa. And then slowly as the ideas start, coming to you, I'll run to my phone and write down a note. And, it's the funniest when you're laying in bed trying to go to sleep. And that's when your mind's just like idea.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it's so incredible. And it always just comes at the most random and worst time where you can't sit there and just immediately get to your computer and write things down. So, let me take a little note on my phone. And yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I don't even know how it happens or why it happens, but I'm always grateful for it.
I understand. The Wall of Winnipeg and Me and Mariana's 85 other books are all available now. We're going to put links to it in the show notes where you can grab it from Amazon or Audible, or go visit your local bookstore and support local books. Mariana, if people are just discovering you and want to dig into your amazing back catalog and follow along for what's coming up new, I know you said you aren't super present on social media, but is there a place where people can find you online and, get all the information they need?
Absolutely. I have a website. It's marianazapata.com. My Instagram, I keep up to date pretty often. And I have a Facebook account I get on when I remember. but you can definitely find everything on there. So, yeah.
Great. We'll link that up to make it easy for folks to find you. Mariana, this has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show.
Oh, I appreciate you so much, Hank. You're really wonderful. And I really had such a good time with you. I appreciate it.
That's our episode for today. There's so much more to come as we talk to authors about the craft of writing, but also the business of publishing. Be sure to subscribe to the Storycraft Cafe podcast in your favorite podcast app so that you never miss an episode. The Storycraft Cafe is made possible by Dabble. Writing a book is challenging. Your writing tool should not be. Dabble is an easy-to-use online writing tool packed with helpful features that allow beginning novelists and published authors to create amazing stories. Visit us at dabblewriter.com and start your free trial today. Thanks for listening.